Service here in Notts is helping local residents cope with the spiralling costs of funerals. Latest figures from the Bramcote Bereavement Service shows the average cost of a funeral is nearly £5,000, with some close to 10. So to tackle this, the service, which is jointly run by the Broxtowe and Erewash Borough Councils, has launched a scheme enabling people to start paying for their funerals in advance rather than paying it all in one go. Richard Mott from the Bereavement Service joins me now to talk about the new prepayment scheme and how they're supporting families as well. Good to see you.
Hello.
Why are funerals so expensive?
It's a very good question, and it's really a question I can't answer because the funeral is dealt with by the funeral director, which we're not in control. What we are in control of is the cremation costs, which is a third-party cost to the funeral directors. And the funeral plans that are offered by the funeral directors are great. They're there to help alleviate the burden of the financial stress. They can be paid over periods of time. But they can't give a figure for the cremation. So what we've done, or the two authorities have done, after a long research, is they've made that decision to offer the prepaid cremation deeds, or the plan, so people can lock in that price today, and then when the time does come, it's all paid for, it's taken care of, there's no financial burden to the family that's left behind.
Right. Is this something you can pay a little bit, say monthly, annually, whatever, and that fund will grow over time? Is that how it works?
So the traditional funeral director plan, there is an option there to pay in instalments. With the cremation deed, currently there isn't, although it is something we're going to look at, but it is a fraction of the overall funeral cost.
Right.
But it is something that we want to offer. It is something that we're going to look at in the future.
Right. Okay. Can I ask you something? If someone doesn't put money into it, could be a scheme like this, or as you mentioned, various funeral directors have similar kind of schemes. If you don't put any money aside for your funeral at all, if there's no money there, what happens?
Well, every family has to deal with that in a different way, and everybody's financial position is different. The reality is that is going to happen to some families. And the reality is that talking about the future isn't a bad thing. To plan ahead is a good thing. To speak to your local funeral director, to put something in place is a good thing. It's a good idea. Not just for yourself with the funeral plan, but for your family, those that you're going to leave behind. They're the people that are going to feel the financial burden and the stress at a very difficult time. So by speaking to funeral directors, by getting something in place, whether they pay for it all in one go up front or whether they take it on a payment instalment plan, but it's good to plan ahead. But for those that make no plans, it is without doubt a difficult time.
Yeah.
And what a lot of families will do, they will look at cheaper alternatives of the direct cremation, which we all see advertised. Many national companies now that offer it at very good prices, and people will be turning perhaps towards that option rather than staying in the local area with their local funeral director where their loved one's taken care of.
Yeah. We've been covering the story of tributes on graves in Broxtowe. I'm aware this is a local authority issue, but I know you've been kind of involved in this conversation along the way. I just wonder what the latest is.
So I can't comment too much because there's meetings in place. What I can tell you is I understand that some representatives who are representing the families saw the council leader last night, right, and some other councillors. I don't know what was discussed. I just know that there was a cabinet meeting happening, and I'm waiting to hear from that. There was a meeting scheduled for next week where there can be a presentation from the families. The leader is affording them that opportunity and suspended any action while this is happening. So he's moving it forward. He's trying to find a solution, and I'm sure it will be reported after the meeting next week.
Okay. And just finally, Richard, this is about, as you mentioned, this is about a conversation that sometimes we daren't have in lots of ways, and not just about finances. This is about what people's wishes are, isn't it, when they're no longer here?
The most important thing is to carry out the wishes of the deceased. And sometimes that's very difficult for the family that are left behind if the decision by the deceased was, for example, a direct cremation, and they're not going to be able to say goodbye and farewell to their loved ones. So it is a very difficult, fine line, and families need to talk about it.
Exactly. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in and telling